Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Spider-Verse Retrospectives. So, we've wrapped up our look at the end of the Spider-Verse storyline, so before we move on to the second half of the finale era, we've got some follow-up material to look at. And, before we actually get to the mini-series that followed up from End of the Spider-Verse, we gotta look at a one-shot. Specifically, ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna be taking a look at this. Marvel's Voices Spider-Verse #1. Now, there's a question to be raised. Why am I looking at this at all? After all, very early on, I said that I would only be looking at comics if they were collected in a trade format. And that, for the most part, is still true. But, this comic, while being a part of Spider-Verse, is not collected in any trade. In fact, to my knowledge, I don't think any of the Marvel Voices one-shots are collected in trades. Well, sort of. I think that there's a trade collecting some of the Marvel Voices one-shots, but I don't think that... But for what I can gather, it's only like the first handful of them, so I don't know. And for all I know, maybe this is a part of those trades, but again, that would mostly be for the Marvel Voices comics. So, as a result, even if I did want to look at them, the only comic I'd be interested in is, well, this. So I feel like that I can still kind of take it away from the Marvel Voices, especially considering that it is a one-shot, and the whole purpose of the Marvel Voices comics are that they're anthology comics, so every comic has multiple stories. Secondly, I'm more willing to cheat with this one because while it is a one-shot, as you can kind of tell, it's a prestige format comic, so it's kind of formatted like a trade. Mind you, it's not a collection of multiple comic issues, it's a collection of multiple stories, but again, look at this thing. It's pretty thick, and it's almost as thick as the next miniseries or the next trade we're going to be looking at. So I'm willing to bend the rules for this a little. Plus, this is not going to be the last comic. This is not going to be the last comic one shot that I break the rule for. Although this one has more leeway. This comic has more leeway for breaking that rule than the next one we're going to be looking at but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. So as a result, this is probably one of the only comics that I'll be making exception to. Again. It's not going to be the only one, but this is going to be the one that I'm mostly explaining. But either way, whatever. So, yeah, Marvel Voices. So, for those who have no idea what Marvel Voices is, it's essentially their imprint. It's essentially their comic anthology imprint that looks at more inclusive characters in Marvel's pantheon of superheroes. So, like, characters that represent minority groups, or people that aren't really as represented in media as other heroes. So, like, say for example, there are characters. I think there was like a Black Panther one shot that focused on characters from Wakanda. There was an X-Men one shot that focused on X-Men that were part of minority groups. Basically, the Marvel Voices comics are just meant to be stories, putting these characters more in the forefront, showing them just doing their own thing. Essentially, it's just meant to showcase, the representation in comics, which I'm all for. It's all pretty cool. Plus, a little fun fact that I didn't know until I read interviews in this comic, apparently Marvel Voices actually got its start as a podcast that eventually branched off and started forming the comics. So again, it's cool stuff. But of course, Spider-Verse got in on that, because after all, as we've established with both the Spider-Verse comics and the Spider-Verse movies, when it comes down to Spider-Man, anyone can wear the mask. While there is a baseline for typically who wears the mask in the multiverse, that does not mean that has to be the baseline. And across the Marvel multiverse, while a good chunk of Spideys typically are Peter Parker, that doesn't mean they all are. There are many different varieties of spider heroes across different universes. Some of them having similar stories to Peter, but also some that go off and branch in their own path. And of course, the most famous of these is Miles Morales, but we got characters like Hobie Brown, Gwen Stacy, Cindy Moon, Miguel O'Hara, and that's just to name a few. Basically, there is a whole variety of spider people out there in the multiverse, and this story highlights a few of them. Most of them are ones we already know, but there are a couple new faces thrown into this book. So again, it's honestly something that's rife for the inclusivity angle. Plus, it's fucking Spider-Verse. The instant I heard that this thing was even gonna be a book at all, I had to have it. Of course, again, it helps that it's a prestige format book, but again, it was a Spider-Verse one-shot, and since I fucking love Spider-Verse. Of course I had to get this comic. So of course it counts, and it's going to be looked at today. But with that said, is this a good collection of stories? Well, let's take a look at it and find out. Of course, for those who haven't watched any of my other previous Spider-Verse videos, again, just a heads up, before I'm going to be summarizing the events of all the stories in this book. And there are 8 stories in this collection, so to speak. No, not even so to speak. There are 8 stories in this collection, so it's going to be a little thing. Plus, I am probably going to be going back and checking it every once in a while to make sure I know which story happens where. So if I either pause the recording for any reason or pull this book up and look at the table of contents, so to speak, it's because I'm trying to figure out which story I need to talk about next. And I'm probably going to do that both for when I do plot summaries and when I start giving my thoughts on each of the stories, because when you have 8 stories collected in a book like this, it's very easy to lose track of which ones are going what place. So there you go. But anyway, also, just another heads up, I'm only going to be discussing the stories. The thing is with this book, which I'm sure is a thing with most other Marvel Voices books, it's that they also have interviews with the creators behind them. There's basically just talking about how certain creators feel about certain characters, how it was like writing for certain characters, how it was like, or in some cases, how it was like creating these characters. Again, it's good stuff, and I dig it, and it does offer some nice insight into what goes into these characters and how certain creators view them, and how they're able to kind of help bring them to light and allow readers to kind of feel like they're more a part of the story, since, well, they're characters that they can relate to in the book. So again, it's good stuff, but that's not what we're here to talk about. If I've showcased anything in all these vlogs, it's that I'm here to talk about comic books and I'm here to talk about the stories, so the stories are what we're going to be focusing on. So with that said, let's get to the first story in this one. And this story is called, again, apologies, the first story is called Birthday Bash, and it stars Miles Morales back in that creptacular tracksuit superhero outfit, which, yeah, I still hate it. It looks just as stupid in this story as it did it looks just as stupid here as it did in End of the Spider-Verse. But the story actually begins with Miles duking out with a supervillain by the name of Scorpia. It goes the same way you would expect a Spider-Man battle to go. He's flipping around, dodging her scorpion tail, shooting webs, making quips, when suddenly in the middle of the fight his phone rings. Miles then stops fighting briefly to answer the phone. Now the other end is his dad, who's telling Miles that he's getting ready for his mom's for Rio's birthday dinner, which Miles says that he'll be there. Though, of course, when Jefferson continues talking to Miles about it, he asks Miles, "Hey, where's your present? I want to see if I can get it wrapped." Which Miles is like, "Present? What present?" So, yeah, Miles' dad starts getting on his case, because the thing is, well, while Miles' mom stated that she wasn't interested, that Miles didn't have to get her a present, well, the good Jefferson Morales tells Miles that, well, he kind of needs to get his mom a present, because that was her way of trying to be nice to Miles and telling him that he didn't need to get all that. At which point Jefferson tells his son that she is a mother of 2, because Miles is a baby sister now, which I'll talk about later because this isn't the last story that Miles has in this story. But either way, he tells him that Rio Morales is a mother of 2, and she works her butt off every day, so he tells Miles he needs to get his mom a gift. As such, after Miles ends the call and manages to finish up his fight with Scorpia, Miles begins wondering, what can he get his mom? He can't really think of anything. However, as he swings by a thrift shop, he recognizes a dolly in the window. A dolly called, I think, Lupe. And Miles remembers once that his mom told him that when she was a kid, she had a Lupe doll, but she doesn't anymore. And the Lupe doll apparently has been discontinued, so they're very rare to find. As such, Miles thinks he struck gold as he runs into the thrift store and buys the doll, hoping that this will be his mom's birthday present. So it looks like everything's all good, right? He has plenty of time to get home. He's got his mom's birthday present in the bag. It's all nice, right? Right? Yeah, you gotta remember that Miles Morales is still Spider-Man, and when it comes to Spider-Man, the universe likes to give him a good, solid, and firm F-U, as while Miles is on his way to his parents, well, there are a bunch of disasters all around New York that require Spider-Man's attention, and so he keeps running around saving people, helping out wherever he can, taking selfies with fans, helping people out of a burning building. Basically, he's just doing all the superhero shenanigans, and while he does kind of end it with some time left to spare to get home, Well, in the midst of the firefight, the bag that he had the doll in caught flames, and while the doll itself is mostly intact, a little bit of her face got burned. So, she's not as intact as Miles had hoped. As such, he managed to make it home and gets out of his Spidey jammies, and as such, he manages to make it just in time before the dinner, but he begins apologize. But as he pulls out the present and gives it to his dad, he begins apologizing that it got so wrecked. At which point Rio comes in and wonders what's going on, and she sees what Miles got her. At first, Miles is just immediately apologizing because he had forgot it's not as good as it should be. Plus, he was dealing with a bunch of emergencies because another thing, Miles' family does know he's Spider-Man right now, but Rio doesn't give a shit. She loves it. It's still a Lupe doll, and yeah, it's a little singed, but that doesn't mean that she's not perfect. And she immediately just hugs her son and says thank you as she says thank you for the awesome gift, which is, again, it's some sweet stuff, and I dig it. And as such, the story ends as Miles and his family just sit down around the table, as Miles and his dad sing happy birthday to his mom, while his little sister Billy just kind of starts spitting up as babies do. So, again, it's cute stuff. But anyway, the second story does actually jump to another parallel universe, as, well, we check back in with the affairs of one Cooper Cohen, aka the Web Weaver, and for this particular story, Cooper is on vacation of a sort. Basically, he's been invited to the birthday party of, I'm sorry, I need to find his name. I did not actually, I don't remember it. The birthday is of a guy by the name of Kyle Janadu? I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that, but either way, it's apparently a very big birthday bash. And the thing is, Cooper has been invited to this birthday before. For previous years, he has gotten on the guest list. But thanks to spider-related shenanigans, he wasn't able to go. As last year, he couldn't come because he was defending Janet Van Dyne from her ex-husband, Hank Pym, who went from being an ant-themed superhero to an ant-themed supervillain. And the year before that, he wasn't able to come because he was duking it out with this world's version of Morbius, who for whatever reason was actually Gwen Stacy. Don't know why. But either way, he thinks he's finally made time, and good enough too, because Kyle just tells Cooper that if he had missed this one, he would have gotten off the guest list permanently. But either way, Cooper is just happy to be there, and even if he hadn't been able to make this birthday, he's been eating vacation for a while. As such, after he gets some what he considers well-deserved roasting, he goes into the home to recuperate, kick up his feet, and he talks about how he's got everything covered now. Silk's back in New York, and he says that he'll be able to keep everything safe, and just in case of emergencies, Cooper did pack his Web Weaver costume, so it looks like that he's getting ready for a nice, relaxing vacation. Yeah, no, like I just said with the last story, the universe likes giving Spider-Man, like spending Spider-Man over and telling him he's effed. Because guess what? As Cooper goes up to the second floor of Kyle's home, his spider sense kicks off, and someone in the shadows begins shooting darts at him. He's able to avoid 3 of them thanks to his agility, but whoever's shooting him manages to get one into his neck, and ultimately he gets knocked out. And when he wakes up, he finds himself in the forest surrounding Kyle's home in his Web Weaver costume, which confuses him until he sees who it is that grabbed him. This reality's version of Kraven the Hunter, who, like the chameleon before her, is also a woman. And yeah, she's pretty much just here to hunt the Web Weaver, which the Web Weaver is more than ready to oblige as he gets up and gets ready to fight Kraven. But Kraven knew that the Web Weaver wanted to end this lickety-split, so she kind of planned a backup. While Cooper was unconscious, she planted various traps around the island that were supposed to mimic some of Cooper's greatest enemies. And as such, she pretty much just tells him that he needs to go deal with that shit or else people are gonna get hurt. As such, needing to prioritize saving lives, Cooper leaves Kraven alone as he starts scouring the island for any of Kraven's traps. And sure enough, he does find them, and Kraven was not lying. Each of the traps is indeed based off one of his villains, as by a pool there's an electro bomb, there's an octo trap that looks like Doc Ock's tentacles. By the beach there's a sand trap that looks like the Sandman. By the beach there's a hydro trap representing the Hydro Man. I think that I wonder if there is another one too. Nope. And at the drag brunch, well, guess what? A drag queen gets a symbiote and becomes venomized. Yeah, even Cooper's like, okay, this is just going overboard. Thankfully, Cooper's had enough experience with symbiotes that he immediately just jumps to a DJ and tells him to turn the speakers up to max, and that is enough to get the symbiote off of the drag queen. So, yeah, it looks like all the traps are finished, and so Craven comes in and gets ready to have her final bash with the web weaver. Unfortunately, she did this right in the middle of the brunch, and here's the thing. I don't think a crowd of people is gonna like the fact that this crazy lady came out of nowhere and is putting all their lives in danger just because she wants to hunt the guy who can shoot webs out of his hands. Put simply, the entire party turns against her, which I would probably call BS on because she's supposed to be a very highly skilled hunter who has probably gone toe-to-toe with the web weaver on a few occasions, but I'd say greater numbers. Plus, I think the idea of an entire party of people just turning against a supervillain and then beating their ass through sheer numbers is hilarious. And I've seen it done in comics before, and it's satisfying there too. So you know what? I don't care. As such, Craven gets her ass whooped by all the party goers, and after she gets webbed up, the web weaver does a dance that everyone cheers him on to do. As such, with Craven taken care of and handed over to the authorities, Web Weaver swings away to go to the mainland, so to speak, which is really just a cover for Coopin to get somewhere and get out of his Spidey jammies. And sure enough, he comes back later, and thankfully Kyle welcomes him back with open arms because, hey, at the very least, he made it to the end. He's here for the end of the party, and well, Cooper's just happy to be included. So, yeah, there's that story. So, but anyway, the third story of this is called An Unraveling Web. Also, that last story was called Fire with Fire, but anyway. Fire with Fire. But either way, An Unraveling Web focuses on Cindy Moon, and this one is a very unique story. It's entirely told through Cindy's point of view. And I don't mean like it's a story that she narrates on, no. As in, the majority of this story is told through her point of view, through her eyesight, through what she sees and experiences, and it's a very trippy story. The basic summation is this. Cindy Moon is hitting burnout. She is working herself to the bone, both in her personal life and in her superhero life. She's basically just burning the candle at both ends, and it gets to the point where she's kind of losing track of time. And I don't mean that in the sense of, oh, she isn't keeping up with the clock. No, I mean like she's losing time. She basically just things just kind of start blurring together for her. Like, one moment she's swinging around kicking bad guys' asses, and then the next moment she finds herself at her therapist's office without any idea of how she got there. And then one moment she's having dinner with her parents, till suddenly she's on a date with this random guy that she's supposed to be meeting with. And then suddenly back to superheroing, back with her parents, back with the therapist. Basically, her whole life is blurring together, and she's losing track of what she's supposed to be doing at what time, and she has absolutely no idea. And she has absolutely no idea what's happening to her. And it gets to the point where it's just kind of tearing herself apart. About her body, she even states in her narration that her body is okay for the most part, though it's not great. But her mind is just kind of like, in her own words, it's like there's another person up there, like the call is coming inside the house, like she's a prisoner of her own head, so to speak. And it's not DID. It is not, because people are going to point out how when someone has DID, they'll have blackouts and lose time. But in this case, no, it's not. It's literally just she's basically everything's blurring together, and she's just running out of time. She has no idea what she's doing, and she has no idea how to say no. Sorry, Ginny came in. But However, as things finally come to a head, when she's supposed to be having a date with a random guy, well, she arrived in her silk jammies, and everyone's taking pictures of her, and she quickly realizes, oh shit, I gotta get out of here, and when she jumps away from the restaurant where they were meeting, which is on the roof of a building, she takes a look at her reflection and sees she's not doing well, as she traded her silk scarf for a pair of sunglasses, and her costume looks like it's in tatters, looking like it hasn't been repaired for a while. And Cindy quickly realizes she needs a break. As such, on the advice of her therapist, who did challenge her to kind of turn off her phone for a while, Cindy sends her a text and says, "Okay, I'm taking your challenge. This is gonna be the last that you hear of me, and for a good chunk of time, no one's gonna be able to get in contact with me," which her therapist is proud of. And well, the story ends. We see Cindy having set up a little web trap on the underside of a Brooklyn bridge as she just begins meditating. It's actually a pretty serene sight. I dig it. So, Yeah, there's that story. As for the fourth story, this one actually stars Hobie Brown, aka the Spider-Punk, and it is called Music for Uplifting Gormandizers. I feel like I'm mispronouncing that. But basically, the plot for this is that Hobie Brown and his friends are going to be going to a punk festival at, well, the home of punk, the Daily Bugle. Yes, we're actually getting to see the Daily Bugle of this reality. And yes, that also means we get to meet the J. Jonah Jameson of this world, who is not criticizing Spider-Man. If anything, he's hosting a Battle of the Bands tournament, which is why Hobie and his crew are here. Which, yeah, I should probably talk about Hobie's crew, because, well, they're kind of new faces for Spider-Verse, though not new faces for the comics. You see, in between, I think, End of the Spider-Verse and this miniseries, or maybe even before End of the Spider-Verse, I don't know, Hobie Brown actually got a miniseries. Well, I mean, the Spider-Punk Hobie Brown did. I have no idea I have no idea what the Hobie Brown in the main universe is doing. I have not looked into that. But put simply, Spider-Punk wound up getting his own miniseries that essentially just focused more in on his world and on his adventures, as what was going on was that someone was taking advantage of Norman Osborn's tech, and so Hobie and his friends were going on a road trip to try and find the source of it all and, take it down. Of course, that was a whole plot line itself, which I'm not going to get into because that's an entirely different story, but in the course of that miniseries, we actually did end up meeting more of the heroes of Hobie's world, which of course, they're all like punk underground characters that you would expect, and some of them are familiar faces, like we check back in with Captain Anarchy and the Hulk, but there are also some new faces as well, and a couple of those new faces are in this book. Specifically, this world's version of Riri Williams, who in the main universe is Ironheart, and Kamala Khan, aka Miss Marvel. Now in Hobie's reality, they're essentially the same characters, as Kamala Khan is still Miss Marvel, and Riri Williams still has created her own Iron Man armor. However, in Riri's case, rather than being called Ironheart, she's called Riot Heart. And while the armor still has the same basic design as her main counterpart's armor, well, it's got some punk aesthetics too, like some spikes in certain areas and so forth. But either way, Kamala, Riri, and yes, Captain Anarchy are joining Hobie for this Battle of the Bands tournament, with Hobie intending for them to be his band. Of course, Riri thinks that this might not be a good idea because, well, none of them, because only Hobie is the only musician among them. They have no idea how to play, but Hobie says it's fine. Punk is music by the people. Music is for the people, by the people, from the people. So of course everyone can play it, right? Well, immediately things kind of go wrong, as when they enter the music venue, the next band gets announced on stage, and they're called the Sinister Six-Piece. Yeah, it's the Sinister Six. And this one I kind of find hilarious, what I find hilarious about these guys is that they don't even try adding punk aesthetics to the supervillains. They're just the supervillains in the main Marvel universe, except they're just in a band. Like, there's Doc Ock, there's the Sandman, hold on, let me look and see if I can find that in the story. Actually, you know what, let me just see if I can pull up the Sinister Six-Piece. Yeah. You got Doc Ock, the Sandman, Scorpion, and this chick. I have absolutely no idea who she's supposed to be. Then again, I also don't know who she is, so whatever. The point is, the Sinister Six-Piece are acted as the bad guys, so to speak, and they use their music to pretty much just hypnotize the entire crowd, which of course includes Hobie and his friends. Thankfully, Riri is unaffected by all this because her armor filters out the music, and at which point, to try and save everyone, she ends up putting a pair of specialized earplugs in Hobie's ears, which do filter out the music as well, thus allowing him to regain his senses and quickly realize, oh shit, those guys up there are using the music to control people, and as such, he immediately jumps into action as he storms on stage and wrecks their equipment so they can't hypnotize anyone. As such, the Sinister Six-Piece, outraged that this guy in the spider costume has kicked their asses, immediately charge at him, and it does lead to a fight between Hobie and the Sinister Six-Piece, which Hobie does well in, but he does end up getting beaten, with the Sinister Six-Piece with Hobie talking about how punk is supposed to be more about freedom, about expressing yourself and all that stuff, and the Sinister Six-Piece just kind of mock him by saying, well, guess what, you're the only one that says that, but then Hobie says, who said I was coming here solo? At which point, we then turn and see that Captain Anarchy, Miss Marvel, and the Riot Heart have jumped onto the stage and join Hobie in kicking the asses of the Sinister Six-Piece. At which point, the story ends with Hobie and his crew on stage, and the Sinister Six-Piece is wrapped up, and Hobie and co. get ready to perform their own song. So again, good stuff. Good stuff. After that, the next story is, well, This is the introduction of a new spider person. Ladies and gentlemen, today's next story is called Working It Out. And the spider person of this world is a Korean American boy by the name of Peter Park. So, yeah, what's the gimmick with this world? It's a sitcom. I am not kidding. The premise for this story is that the universe itself is one of those corny sitcoms that you used to watch in the 90s. It is a sitcom called Working It Out, and the premise of the story is that the main characters are Anthony Stark and Harry Osborn. They are the sons of two rich industrialists who are trying to make it work in the real world, be real people, deal with real struggles, and the supporting cast consists of their girlfriends, which in this case are Pepper Potts and Mary Jane Watson, and of course they also have they also have a supportive best. They also have a place where they all hang out, which is Auntie May's, and of course Peter Park is basically just a supportive best friend in the group. It's just a sitcom story, but it takes the sitcom in a very interesting angle because you see when it comes to the world of the sitcom itself, the story is supposed to be focused on Anthony and Harry and the hijinks that they and their respective partners get up to. But the main story of the comic, we're focusing on Peter. And the thing is, unbeknownst to all of the main characters of the sitcom, Peter Park has a double life. For you see, when he was 10 years old and away at summer camp, he got bitten by a radioactive spider, and, well, like most other Peters in the multiverse, the spider bite wound up giving him superpowers, and as a result, he wound up using those powers to go on to become a spider-themed superhero, calling himself the Spider Friend, which, if I can give some flack to this story, let's see if I can actually find him. I don't think I care for the names. Well, I think Spider-Friend is an interesting concept. I hate this costume. Like, just look at it. This is the Spider-Friend costume, and, I don't like it. It's kind of dumb. Now, the creator of the book in an interview in the story admitted that he used, like, a 90s aesthetics when making the costume, and you can see it, but I still think it looks lame. It very much just looks like an old like it's trying too hard to be one of those classic superhero costumes. And while there's enough in there that you can still see the Spider-Man aesthetics, it's still just kind of looks lame, at least in my opinion. You're free to disagree, and quite frankly, if the creator sees this, I am so sorry. Please do not hate me. Again, this is just my opinion, and if you still like the suit, my friend, keep it liking it. It's your creation. You continue enjoying it, and even if I don't like the suit, that doesn't mean the story itself is bad, which I'll get to my full thoughts on that at the end of the video when I decide the point. Point is, my point is this. In the world of sitcom, the main focus is always on Anthony, Howard, and their girlfriends, whereas in the world of the comic, we are actually checking in on Peter Park's life. And yes, none of his friends know that he is Spider-Friend, because while they're over here having the zany sitcom-esque antics, Peter's over here kicking ass as the Spider-Friend, and, yeah, it's not an easy life. The only lifeline he really has is Auntie May, who is fully aware that Peter is Spider-Friend, and, unlike in the main universe where Aunt May was Peter's actual aunt, in this reality, she's Peter's adoptive mother, as, like I said, Peter's a Korean American, and and this world's May and Ben Park wound up adopting him, and essentially, he's their son. Although he doesn't always call May a mom. He does just call her Auntie May, which I guess because he's older and because they're not technically related, but at the end of the day, she's still his mom, and thus she's aware of his secret double life, and tends to be his support system, so to speak, helping him out whenever the fight gets too rough, bandaging him up, helping him keep up appearances. Basically, she's just there to help. Basically, she's just there to make sure he stays in one piece. And sure enough, today is no different, as while Pepper Potts calls an emergency meeting at Auntie May's diner about hosting a secret surprise party for Tony, which is supposed to be based off this show called Galaxy Treks, which is supposed to be their version of Star Trek. Basically, Peter starts basically in the middle of setting up the party, Peter's spider sense goes off, and when he looks out the window, he sees the Vulture flying by. And of course, realizing that the supervillain's only going to be doing supervillain things, he suits up into his Spidey jammies and pursues him. And well, the Vulture's targeting Anthony, who we see standing on top of a building as he's in his own Galaxy Trex costume playing with a toy phaser, because, well, while it was supposed to be a surprise party, he listened in on it thanks to his spy device, so he knows what he's getting into. My point is this: the Vulture has been hired to kill Anthony, and whoever's hired him is speaking to him over an earpiece. Of course, Spider-Friend, being both friends with Anthony Stark and the town's resident superhero, is not going to let Vulture get his way, and so he swings in and starts kicking the Vulture's ass. At which point, while the Vulture continues trying to get at Anthony, thankfully, Tony realizes, hey, there's a supervillain trying to kill me, and then runs inside the building away from Vulture's weapons, and ultimately Vulture and Spider-Friend manage to kind of struggle enough in the air that they end up getting knocked off of the building, and they land right in a dumpster, with the Vulture unconscious thanks to his powers, while Spider-Friend is just kind of banged up. And, well, with the Vulture beaten, the Spider-Friend ends up hearing who's hired the Vulture over his comms piece, and that person was Norman Osborn. You know, Harry's dad. Like I said, he's a scumbag in most realities. But either way, after this fight, he manages to hobble his way back to Auntie May's, managing to get in a back way, and from there, he just begins wondering what is the point of doing all this. Because after all, he's been best friends with Anthony and Harry and Pepper and Mary Jane for years, and he's done his best to support them, got caught up in their wacky hijinks, fallen for a lot of their tricks. But none of them really know him. None of them really know how much he does for them, how much he sacrifices for them as the Spider-Friend, and he begins wondering if they even really appreciate him. At which point, as Auntie May begins kind of patching up his wounds, she kind of gives him some honestly nice advice. The thing is, he's been friends with these people since he was in middle school, and yes, they may not all, it's up to Peter whether he wants to stay friends with him, but she also knows that whether they deserve that help or not, helping people is its own reward. It's doing the right thing that's honest. And regardless of whether these people know it or not, they always are there. Hold on, let me just look at the book. Sorry, I just want to make sure I did this right. But basically, yeah, Auntie May does confirm that ultimately everyone is worth saving. And yes, these people can be snarky, but Peter has a gift, and he uses it for the right reasons. He helps people, and at the end of the day, that's what makes him a better person. That's what makes him a bigger person. That's what makes him a great friend. And ultimately, that does kind of give Peter the lift up he needs as Auntie May gets him dressed in a Galaxy Trex costume, and she basically just shoos him off to go join the party, and Peter kind of tells her thanks, even calling her mom. Before the story ends, as when he goes out there, Anthony just pulls him in for a side hug, happy that his first mate is on board. So, good stuff. But anyway, the next story on the list is called Training Day, and it's another Miles story. Only in this case, this one is kind of was in the then modern continuity, which I guess it's still the modern continuity, but it was dealing with stuff that was going on in Miles' book at the time, even written by the same writer. In this case, we see Miles back in his regular Spider-Man outfit, which I say, thank God. Again, I hate the tracksuit outfit, as we see him receiving training from one Misty Knight, who I know nothing about her, so don't expect me to give you any details about her. But basically, they're in the middle of a training session, and Miles brought along his little sister. Why? Because his parents were busy and they couldn't find a sitter. So Miles is being a good big brother and taking care of her. While Misty is a little against having this kid on standby, Miles said, "It's fine. I'm taking care of. You're not babysitting her. I am. So you don't have to help me out. I'm just doing my big other thing." So Misty just kind of rolls her eyes and concedes to this, and so she and Miles continue duking it out. And right there. Until Billy poops her diaper. So they have to stop training as Miles changes her. At which point Misty decides, you know what, fine, maybe this whole fighting thing isn't working. There's one more thing I gotta show you, and it doesn't require fighting. As such, Miles grabs Billy, and Misty leads Miles away from the gym, even telling him he needs to ditch his mask. And she doesn't go out and expose identity. She even gives him a jacket to hide his Spidey jammies. And as such, and as such, she even blindfolds him as they get into her car and drive into her neighborhood. And basically, Misty gives Miles this whole spiel about how about the community, about all the people who make it work, and how ultimately their job as heroes is to not only help this place by making it better, but get it to a point where they don't really need them anymore. Essentially, just make the place such a thriving community that so that bad people just don't want to come here, so that people can trust in each other, people can actually help each other. Basically, it's basically just kind of helping make things a better place and just help the community by making it stronger. But of course, that's not the whole lesson of what Misty is trying to teach Miles as they continue driving along until they reach a destination, and that destination is a restaurant, specifically again, I need to look this up because I really want to make sure I get this right. It's a Nigerian restaurant, and they're not here because because the owners are secretly superheroes, or because he's going to get some secret training. No, they're just here to get lunch. And the whole reason why Misty brought Miles here is because that is just to kind of just remind him that as superheroes, it's their job to kind of take time away from themselves. And they're not just helping people because they want to make everything a better place, but it's so that they can have more moments like this, where they can just calm down, relax, and get to a point where they don't need to be heroes anymore. They can just sit back and relax, and yeah, they'll always be on standby if something big or dangerous happens, but ultimately, they need to cherish these little moments and just kind of relish them, just to have their own lives. Again, good stuff, and I dig it. As the story ends, as Miles and Misty order food, and Billy ends up burping, which gets Miles laughing. So, again, very cute stuff. It's a sweet story, so I dig it. Again, trying to be sure I get everything right here. But anyway, the seventh story in this mix, well, again, new Spidey time, and this one is an interesting case. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce you to Recluse, and let me see if I can get a good picture of her. This is Recluse. And if I can say something right now, I fucking love her costume. I mean it. I really love her costume. The design, in the interview with the writer and artist of the story, they stated that part of the reason why they made the outfit look the way they did is because they wanted to make it look like a gymnast outfit, which I can kind of see the aesthetic, but for me what appeals to it is how it mixes together traditional motifs that you would see in a Spider-Man outfit, while still kind of giving us its own thing with the color scheme, the shoulder pads, the slimmer look. It's a very unique design, integrating enough so that you can recognize Recluse as an alternate Spider person, while also being its own thing. So again, I dig it. But what's her deal? Well, Recluse's universe is a interesting one, to say the least. In her reality, it's, in the creator's own words, it's like our reality, but turned up a bit. Basically, in this world, everything is advertising. Technology is run rampant, but either you're seeing advertising or you're an ad yourself. Basically, everyone is plugged into one another. Everything is connected. Basically, it's just oversaturation of media. It's just the oversaturation of media turned up to 11. And well, that's what Recluse is fighting against. Because you see, if you're not part of the system, they want to cut you out completely, which is where Recluse, aka Zion Riley, came in. Once upon a time, Zion did want to become a part of this whole system. Her dad was even working for the guy that put it in place, and you want to know who the one who did it was? Maxwell Dillon, Electro. And yes, he still has electric powers in this reality. And before anyone asks, no, this is not the version of Max who went on to become the Battery. It's a completely different scumbag, Max Dillon, and of course even then, the Battery's real name was Mike, so whatever. But either way, Max Dillon created a system that connected everyone called Spider. And originally, Spider was like the internet of this world, and you could access it through your phones. However, they had integrated a new system, something called SAC, I think, but don't quote me on that. I could be misinterpreting stuff in the story. So again, take what I'm saying with a grain of salt here. But ultimately, he was creating a system wherein the Spider system, which is SPY, was supposed to be able to be actually integrated into your being. You wouldn't need to grab your phone anymore. You just always be connected. And well, Zion had an in because like I said, her dad worked for Max. And as such, she managed to get an in, and actually was one of the first people that was going to be set to volunteer for the process. Unfortunately, though, things went a little awry, as when they were going to inject her with the necessary serum to, get her booted up, well, a spider got mixed into the process, and as a result, Zion Riley got spider powers, and she went into a coma for 8 months. So yeah, it was a failure. She got boot. She managed. She didn't manage to get into the spider system at all, and ultimately her dad was outraged, and so he wound up filing a lawsuit against Max Dillon. And as a result, Max wound up scrubbing the whole process and just wiped it from his records. Zion's dad kind of got thrown through the crapper, and Zion was out of the system. And it was only from being outside the system and it was only by getting outside the system that she realized this shit's kind of broken, and this guy is very much invading our privacy in ways that we don't want him to. And as such, she decided when she eventually woke up that if she was going to fight this asshole, well, she was going to do it the best way she could. And so, using her newfound spider powers, Zion went on to become Recluse. And well, she's duked it out with Max Dillon on more than one occasion. And well, today we're seeing her as she's dealing with that shit. As after evading a group of robots called Black Widow drones who are hunting Recluse because she's not part of the Spider Network, she manages to make her way to Max Dillon's newest facility, where she finds the source of the SAC system, which if Maxwell manages to launch it, it'll essentially get linked into all the private affairs of a bunch of too many important people. And well, since Max is the one in charge of the spider system, well, that means he'll have all the information on standby, and he'll be able to have them under his thumb. Something that Recluse is not okay with, as she manages to sneak into his office, find the source of it all, and then just smash it into her hands because it's an orb for whatever reason. I'm guessing you probably should not make the core of your system's relay be an orb, or maybe it's not really the source of it. It's just an important part. Either way, Recluse smashes it, and that sets off enough alarms to get Max running into his office and seeing Recluse. Of course, she gives him the typical Spidey spiel while mocking him and all that. And Max decides, fuck it, I'm just gonna go. Max says, fuck it, this is the last time you'll screw with me. As he pulls out a trapdoor button and has her fall through a trapdoor. He at first thinks that he stopped her, except he forgets that she has spider powers, and so she flips right out of the trapdoor and starts kicking his ass. Now, before, Max didn't want to use his powers because he was in a room with some very important equipment, and, well, he's Electro. His electric powers are what actually short everything out. Well, Recluse kind of pissed him off enough here that he just kind of went, fuck it, and then just immediately powered up to fight her. As such, Recluse and Electro have themselves a little duke out, but ultimately, Recluse is able to get out of his grip and is able to stifle his electricity by webbing him to the wall and completely covering him up. So yeah, Electro's down for the count. So yeah, good guy wins. Although this isn't the end of Recluse's adventures, as once she finishes that up, this world's version of Captain America shows up, and for whatever reason, he's a long, blonde-haired hippie dude, man. Typically, Peace wears a jacket and got a little soul patch right here, and he says he's got to recruit Recluse for some serious world-saving stuff. Well, Recluse is kind of annoyed by this since she just took out a supervillain. Well, again, world's in danger, needs our help, and so she and Captain America go off to go and deal with that shit, and thus that's where the story ends. So there you go. But ultimately, we still got one more story to look at. And the next one is a pretty basic story in terms of summation, as the next story is actually about Spider-Gwen. And it's basically just about her as she's, just in a band. Basically, as she and the Mary Janes are practicing, Gwen finds that she can't get the drum beats right, and it's kind of getting to her. As such, when the band breaks for lunch, Gwen tells everyone to just, go off without her. She's got to think about some things. And so she begins wandering the street, wondering what she can do to improve her game, until she hears someone crying out for help from the bank. And so she decides, well, that's a good way to get off. That's a good way to distract her mind as she gets into her Spidey jammies and goes to the bank to deal with the robbers. And so she sneaks in, and, well, she manages to knock out a couple. And as such, she encounters the robbers as they're in a vault, and, well, she immediately antagonizes them, and they try to hit her with their fists, but again, they're going up against a lady with spider powers. They're not going to hit her. However, as they keep trying to hit her, they keep banging their fists into the wall, and the rhythm they're doing it actually gives Gwen inspiration, and she thinks, hey, that's the beat I'm looking for. Thanks, guys! I'm still gonna have to kick your asses, but still. As she ends up being the bad guys, and the story ends with her relishing the new beat, as she's back to playing the drums and now more confident. So there you go. But yeah, that's all the stories, and my thoughts on all of them. Well, first let's talk about the birthday bash story. Let's talk about the first story, Miles Morales' birthday bash, and this story is a pretty good story. It's a very much a slice of life family story from from Miles' perspective, that's still kind of drenched in that typical Spider-Man crazy zaniness that you would come to expect. As there's just some kind of humor in seeing Miles swinging all across New York, just kind of seeing Miles swinging across New York with his mom's gift in tow, and he keeps thinking, "Oh, I got plenty of time to get to the party. I'll be able to make it." But just one by one, little things come up that he's got to deal with because, well, he's Spider-Man, and little by little he keeps getting more and more delayed until eventually the gift he got singed. So again, it's the typical antics that you would expect from a Spider-Man story, and it's good stuff. I even love, like, one of my favorite moments in the story, believe it or not, is after Miles deals with Scorpion, he's swinging around, he begins contemplating various gifts, and basically the little talk he has with himself as he swings through New York is like, should I get her this? No, she's not into that. Makeup, I don't even know what kind of makeup she has. What does she like? I should have asked her more. Again, it's funny stuff, and I like it. It's kind of what you would expect from a Spider-Man story, and the whole story is kind of dripping in that same kind of tone, and it works well. It's kind of like a sitcom-esque. It's kind of a quirky sitcom-esque humor, and I dig it. It's some good stuff. And of course, in that same vein of Spider-Man stories, it eventually all does work out. As while Miles ultimately didn't manage to make things work exactly the way he wanted, he still managed to be there for the important stuff with his mom. And while the gift that he got her might not be exactly the way may not exactly be in the best condition, she still loves it all the same, and she appreciates the effort Miles went to. It's ultimately just a very wholesome and sweet story that's just filled with all those typical Spidey antics that we've come to love and appreciate. So on the whole, it's a good story, and it's all on the whole it's a fun swashbuckling and very wholesome story that I can't help but dig. So there you go. So next up is the Webweaver story, and that one's also a lot of fun. I like that we get to see more of Cooper Cohen in the comics, and I use alliteration there, but again, I like seeing more of him. And again, when it comes to the whole multiple universes thing, I always like seeing stories that expand on already existing universes and concepts that deal with what the world is like and how it operates. And yes, I do like that we're getting to see more of Cooper's world in this case. I like that we're seeing more of his rogues gallery, so to speak, and that while the villains that he faces are familiar enough to the ones that we know, they're also their own unique thing. It's, again, interesting stuff, and kind of delves into the type of parallel universe that I like, where things are just different. That it's not like one singular thing that caused this world to branch off. It's just a bunch of little things that all happen to be in the same universe, and I like seeing that because, again, it offers some more interesting takes because it kind of shows just how unique and diverse this world is. Plus, again, like with the Miles story, this one does kind of have the typical Spider-Man typical Spider-Man quirkiness, as again, Cooper's supposed to be attending a birthday party that he was supposed to attend 2 years to the 2 prior years, but because of his duty as the Web Weaver, he couldn't be there. Which again also offers some nice insight into this world, as we got to see more of it because we see more of his rogue gallery there with Hank Pym being a bad guy here, and Gwen Stacy being the living vampire instead of Michael Morbius. So that's kind of fun. So again, amusing stuff, and it does still I kind of love again the just kind of the whole how Cooper kind of jinxed it, as he thought, oh, I'm just looking forward to having a nice relaxing vacation, then his spider sense tingles and he's like, oh shit, I jinxed it, and so he has to dodge Craven's blow darts. So again, good stuff. So again, I find that funny. As for the rest of the story, it's again just kind of standard stuff from what you would expect from a superhero story. As Cooper has to kind of make sure that nobody in the party is harmed by any of Craven's traps, deals with everything in lickety split. And it's creative stuff and fun. It's creative stuff and fun. Though I will admit, it does feel a little rushed. I understand it's a short story. You gotta be sure you have to cram only so much in as quickly as possible. But just as a consequence of that, the finale and climax don't feel as grand as they should, so to speak. It feels like we should have had like a real we should have had a real battle. But with that being said, it's not horrible either. It's overall just a decent story. Which, and again, I still find it hilarious that Craven eventually got her ass kicked by just a party full of people who were pretty much just saying, "Hey, stop messing with us. We will get you." It's fun. I dig it. I like it. Overall, a decent story. I would say it's a great story. It's just that because of how rushed the last third is, it does kind of hold it back a little. Again, not gonna say that that's a bad thing. Again, it has to be a short story in an 80-page comic that consists of both ads and interviews. So again, you gotta need to condense some stuff. Which again, the third act is not horrible by any means, because it still shows Cooper fighting and kicking ass against each of Craven's traps. And again, I do like that he's still smart. Like we see more of his his battle tactics, as has had experience with these sort of things. And I love that his first plan with the Venomized drag queen was just to tell the DJ to turn up the max to get the symbiote off of him. So again, it's good stuff, and I dig it. So on the whole, again, decent story. Again, overall, still a decent story, entertaining enough, and it's still fun to see more of Cooper's world and how he works in it. So overall, just an enjoyable story. So, yeah. As for the third story, what is the third story? Again, I have to look in these things because it's hard to keep track of which one's which. An Unraveling Web with Cindy Moon. This one is it's a very unique story in that regard, as unlike the previous two stories, which typically dealt with the typical superhero action, this one deals with a more personal look. And before you bring up about how the first story did kind of deal with Miles in his everyday life as he was dealing with the Spider-Man antics while trying to make sure he made it to his mom's birthday on time, what I think works well for this particular story is, well, it's just how it's told. And how it basically, the whole purpose of the story is to show Cindy Moon at her limit, as she's basically just juggling so much stuff, and she's a wreck as a result. She has not gotten, she's had insomnia up the wazoo. She can barely keep track of time, and while she keeps telling herself that she can do it all, she's stretched to her limit, and it's beginning to have an effect on her in her personal life. Which, yeah, you can kind of, after all, when you're a superhero, you gotta deal with juggling multiple things at once. But I think what makes the story really sell just how stretched thin Cindy really is are the time jumps. And it helps that when we're seeing them all through, like I said, through Cindy's point of view. We're seeing all of this through her eyes. And as a result, whenever the comic, like, shifts ahead to a future, to something else, like first she's fighting a bank robbers and then she's with her therapist, we're seeing her in her monologue as she's like, wait, wasn't I just there? Which I think is a really interesting way of showcasing just how badly things have gotten for her. There's just too much going on in her life, and it's getting hard for her to keep track of what happened when, or how, or what she's doing at any given time. And as a result, things are just beginning to blur together. And as the story goes along, you're seeing how it's affecting both her and the people around her. Because ultimately, by virtue of the story being told through her point of view, we don't see how it's affecting her in the most part. Because in that regard, which makes sense, because the reason that she keeps putting herself through all this hell is because she thinks, I can do it all. I can do it all. I'm Silk. I'm a superhero. I can deal with all this shit. I can deal with my family. I can get dates. I can fight supervillains. I can deal with therapy. I can deal with all this stuff. I'm the bestest at it. But it isn't until things start getting sketchy for her that she quickly realizes that she does need to take a break. And I love that, because you can sense that something is not right for her because of all the time skips and her inner monologue. Because with how things jump around, it gets very confusing and cluttered and kind of unnerving, which I think works to the story's advantage, because Cindy's feeling the exact same way we are. Because just as we're seeing the story jump ahead, so is she. She is losing because it's hard for her to keep track of what she's doing at any given time. And so, like I said, one moment she could be duking it out with criminals as Silk, and then the next moment she's at her parents' doorstep because it's dinner night, because it's supposed to be dinner night, or at least that's what she thinks it is, only to learn that it's apparently later than she thought it was. Again, she doesn't know either. She's just stretched so thin that she's losing track of time, having it all blur together, and as a result, she's a wreck. And it works to the story's advantage, because by virtue of how they're showcasing it to us, we get a sense of just how badly she's got it, because we're sort of feeling that same way by virtue of us seeing it through her eyes. And it works to her advantage, which in turn makes the ending that much more powerful, because when Cindy finally decides to take a break and things start feeling more structured again, it feels calmer. And as a result, seeing the final shot in the story of Cindy just hanging upside down under the George Washington Bridge, meditating as she's webbed herself upside down, it's a good stuff, and I like it. So in that regard, I think Cindy's story is actually a very interesting one that I think kind of has a very important lesson that eventually, sometimes you do need to take time away for yourself, because it's good to try and be there for other people, but you need to take time for yourself, because if you don't, it's gonna wreck you in the end, as Cindy showcased throughout the story, as she kept getting things so confused that she had no idea what was happening at any given time. So again, on the whole, a very interesting and honestly really good story that I think really delves into a serious issue that I think a lot of people need to learn. So yeah, good stuff. Hold on one second. But anyway, with Cindy's story out of the way, let's talk about the Spider-Punk story. And I really don't have any very big, deep thoughts about this one. It's just a Spider-Punk story, and as I've hopefully established with all these comics, Spider-Punk kicks ass, and the story is no exception. As he, Captain Anarchy, Riot Heart, and Ms. Marvel just go to a Battle of the Bands concert and just duke it out with some supervillains. It's again in the same parody fashion that Spider-Punk's world is supposed to be, with having the supervillains and use the power of music to take control of people. Hobie jumping in and saying that punk is for the people. It's supposed to be freeing. It's supposed to be about individualism and all that stuff. It's just some silly, kick-ass fun. Not meant to be taken too seriously, but it's just there to help enjoy yourself, and just kind of enjoy some kind of over-the-top Spider-Man action with punk rock mixed in. So again, not a lot to the story, but it's enjoyable in its own regard. Plus, like with the Web Weaver story, it's nice to still see more of Hobie's world and seeing it expanded. Which, by the way, if you haven't read the Spider-Punk miniseries, by all means, find it. Very much worth your time. I really need to get that trade. But anyway, I really need to get the second trade, I mean. But either way, overall, just a unique and interesting story. As such, for the fifth story, which I think is the Spider-Friend story, let me reconfirm on that. Yep, it's the Spider-Friend story. This one, I'm not gonna lie, I think it's my favorite. While I trashed on Spider-Friend's outfit when I talked about the story, I think the rest of the story and just the whole idea behind this world more than makes up for it, because, well, essentially, it takes the idea of having that of showcasing what your supportive best friend would be doing when the camera's not on them. And I think it's an honestly interesting angle to take. That while the main focus is over here and dealing with the antics of our typical main characters, which in this world's case is Anthony Stark and Harry Osborn, on the sidelines, the supportive best friend character, in this case Peter Park, is having his own adventures. And I like that. It's a very interesting stuff, because it's kind of like, you know the play Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead? Well, it's kind of like that, because ultimately, while the story we're being shown is the more important thing, what we fail to notice is that in the background, a character that we only really see as a supporting side character has in fact a bigger has had more to them. In the case of Peter Park, that he's the Spider-Friend. As while Anthony and Harry are dealing with all the typical sitcom shenanigans that one would typically expect from stuff like this, Peter is over here just doing everything in his power to keep everything afloat. Hell, in the beginning of the story, before he goes to join Pepper Potts' little emergency meeting, he got done saving Anthony Stark from an attack by the Rhino. So he's already kind of bruised up a little. He's got a black eye and a cut on his cheek, which Auntie May immediately notices, and while everyone's distracted over here talking about their stuff, they pull Peter. She pulls Peter away to tend to his injuries and ask him if he was okay. So I find that very interesting and unique. And what I like is that it kind of shows a different angle to these sitcom-y worlds. That ultimately, while we see all the zany little antics that you would see on the screen, there is another reality to it that we just don't see. And that's the reality that Spider-Friend has to deal with. As while Harry and Tony are over here just trying to think of some harebrained scheme, trying to make it in the world, and dealing with crazy antics and having fun and playing pranks on the other while getting into goofy antics, Peter Park is over here trying to hold it all together, keep everyone safe, and nobody knows he's doing it. It's a very unique and interesting premise, and I love how they showcase it in the story, especially since part of the plot for the story is that Harry's dad wants Tony dead. So, yeah, not exactly fun. And the fact that Peter knows this and he can't tell anyone about it, that wouldn't get to anyone. But ultimately, what keeps him grounded and what keeps him kind of going over the edge and just saying, fuck this noise, I don't want to do it anymore, is Auntie May. Because like with the main universe Aunt May, she's supportive of Peter. She imparts upon him great life lessons, and she's there for him when he needs her. She's his support system. She helps him out, builds him back up when he's feeling down. It's again just some really sweet stuff, and as a result, it makes for it not only creates a very unique premise by showcasing what Peter Park's role is in this whole sitcom-y world, but also kind of gives it a deeper reality that not only creates a sense, but not only kind of shows some of the darker aspects of the world that we don't see, but also more uplifting bits. Because at the end of the day, Peter is the supportive spider friend. He helps out where he can, and while his friends may not always know what he does, they always appreciate having him there, and he is still an integral part of their lives. I like that. It's a very unique and interesting premise, and quite frankly, while I may not like the Spider-Friend costume, I would love to see more of Spider-Friend in the future. I would love to see more of this world revisited, and just kind of see how it continues going. So, as a whole, it's a great story. I dig it. And another thing that makes this story kind of memorable to me, you want to know what the official designation for this universe is? It's Earth CH10. That's right, it's Earth Channel 10. I love it. It's great. So on the whole, like I said, probably my favorite story in the bunch. A very interesting premise, very interesting take on the whole, and a very interesting main character, very interesting setup. On the whole, very cool story. So I dig it. Afterwards, that's it. Afterwards, we'll get to the second Miles Morales story. This one called, again, Training Day. This one is, again, a more down-to-earth story. It's nothing too fantastic, but honestly, it doesn't need to be anything fantastic because, well, when you're a superhero, at the end of the day, it kind of helps to remind yourself, like going back, kind of in the same vein as the Cindy Moon story, which I think is actually my second favorite story just because of how it tells everything. It's kind of nice to remind yourself what you're doing this whole superhero gig for. And I like how Misty Knight imparts that onto Miles. Essentially just kind of showcasing that, at the end of the day, while they're the protectors of this community, well, it's their job to help make sure this community stands up on its own. Make sure that it gets strong enough so that eventually, maybe this place doesn't need them anymore. Which, again, kind of fits into what superheroes are typically about, as, well, in the words of Superman himself, the perfect world doesn't need a Superman. And so likewise, a strong community doesn't need any superheroes because there wouldn't be a need for them. Which I like that, and I like seeing that. But it also kind of helps, again, kind of fitting into what's going on, like what we saw in the Cindy Moon story, because part of the reason why they do all of this is not just so that everyone can be happy, but that the heroes can be happy. So they can kind of enjoy the fruits of their spoils. Essentially, essentially what Misty is saying is that, yeah, they help out this community, help it sustain itself, and that when everything is said and done, you can be a little selfish and kind of enjoy the fruits of your labor. I like that. It's nice. It's nice. It's a good little way of kind of being with the people, so to speak, kind of helping remind you what superheroes are supposed to do, or what heroes are supposed to do. And at the end of the day, it is okay to kind of enjoy the fruits of your labor and help, and just kind of take time for yourself. It's, again, simple, sweet, to the point. It's the good stuff. It's just good stuff. As for the Recluse story, like with the Spider-Friend story, I love the angle this story takes. It's very, very cool, and I will give credit where it's due. Like I said, love the Recluse costume. Very kick-ass. Very awesome. Definitely something great. And the Recluse story itself, while not my favorite in the bunch, it's a very kick-ass premise itself. While I wish we could have seen more to Recluse's world, since the whole gimmick behind it is that it's supposed to be a world where everyone is plugged in and everyone is connected, I do like the way they visually showcase the world in her story does still give you a sense of just how technologically advanced it is. Like, this is the first shot of Recluse's world, and it's a very unique place. Just bright lights everywhere, advertising all over the place, and there's Recluse just sitting in the shadows, operating on the outside, but doing everything in her power to keep everyone inside safe, so that the very force they've allowed themselves to become a part of don't take advantage of them. It's some genuinely interesting stuff, but at its core, it's a Spider-Man story. That's really all it needs. That's really all it is. And that's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing at all. Does it make it less definable as a story? Maybe, but I think at the end of the day, everything that's unique about the world is still pretty unique, and I would honestly say that I wish we could see more of Recluse's world. But the story itself is just kind of what you would expect from a Spider-Man story. Recluse swinging around, flipping, helping out, helping out, giving funny little quips. There's one scene where she's being chased by the Black Widow robots, and as she tells a bunch of innocent bystanders to get out of there, she grabs a pizza slice from a guy, and as she's talking, and she just stops to take a bite out of it, and the robots fight her, and she's still eating the pizza, but in the midst of the fight, she loses it. She's like, "No, my pizza!" And in her inner monologue's like, "Yeah, I really don't like these guys. That's Spider-Man! That's what you'd expect from Spider-Man! And it's all throughout the story! Her witty banter when she dukes it out with Electro, when she smashes his stuff, when he loses his shit because he's tired of Recluse constantly messing with him, to Recluse finally just giving her all just to web him to a wall before trying to take a breath before Captain America comes in and says, "Hey, we need your help with something." It's fun stuff, and I dig it, and on the whole, it's honestly a pretty good idea, and again, a creative premise for an alternate universe. Like with Spider-Friend, I would be more open to seeing more stuff with Recluse in the future. She's a cool superhero, cool premise. I love cool premise, cool idea. On the whole, good story. And as for the Spider-Gwen story, it's a very simple story. Nothing really to it. Like with the first two stories in the Spider-Punk story, it's just Spider-Man. It's just typical Spider-Man antics. Gwen's having trouble in her personal life, needs a break, gets some time off when she sees a bank robbery going on, so she slips into her Spidey jammies and kicks ass. And it's during the fight that she gets inspiration. It's again nothing too big, nothing too grand. It's just simple slice of life stuff with Gwen trying to fix a small problem by dealing with a big one, and ultimately by stopping the robbers, she finds what she's looking for, and it helps get her focus back on. So again, nothing too big or fantastic, but it's all right and entertaining on its own. So I dig it. So yeah, on the whole, my thoughts on this one shot. Really good stuff. It's really good stuff. Much like with Edge of Spider-Verse or the Spider-Verse miniseries or the Vault of Spiders miniseries, basically with any anthology books that we've looked at so far, this book on its own is essentially just meant to be a storehouse of all these different and unique takes on Spider-Man. And likewise, I think what makes them work is that because the majority of these stories are of pre-established Spider people, it allows us to just kind of peek back into their worlds and just kind of see them doing their own thing. And that's not to knock the new Spideys that were created in this, because like I said, Spider-Friend and Recluse, really kick-ass versions of the web slinger that I would be open to seeing more of. And I do like seeing their stories, but even those stories have the same thing that the other ones do, because ultimately we're just seeing we're just kind of seeing a day in the life of these characters. And the thing is, part of the reason why Marvel Voices is the way it is because it wants to showcase these characters fighting side by side with all these Marvel characters, showcasing that the people like them have people they can look up to. They'll let them know you're represented. You can be a part of this. It's not just this random guy. It's not just this particular group of people who can be superheroes. You can be a superhero. Anybody can be a superhero. And the thing is, the variety of stories featured in this, I think, do a good job of it, because pretty much all the Spideys featured in this book are all very unique and interesting, and each kind of cover a different baseline, each cover a different group, and all of them I think work perfectly. They all basically, like I said, kind of what I've commented in other Spider-Verse stories, they all take the premise of Spider-Man and then run with it in their own way, keeping enough of the original elements in place that it's still recognizable, but still doing enough difference that it's its own thing and separate from the main universe Spider-Man that we all know and love. But in that regard, it still tells some very unique stories with them. Some being more character-driven than others, some being more action-packed than others, some just being silly, zany fun. But each of them in their own way brings a different flavor to the mix. It showcases a new variety of characters dealing with different struggles, different things, just being a different but all being from different walks of life, but all having the one thing in common, that at their base form, they're all Spider-Man, and they're all fighting the good fight. It's, again, a nice little showcase of the tried and true term, anyone can wear the mask. And I think this patch of stories does a great job of showcasing that with a nice variety of characters, a nice variety of stories, and on the whole, just Overall, overall, it's just a good book in general. And quite frankly, if you haven't picked up this book yet, I highly recommend it. Either try and hunt down a physical copy like I did, or find it on digital. Either way, however you read it, by all means read it. Hell, maybe you check out any other Marvel Voices books, because if they're anything like this one, then there's quite a widespread variety of talent in place with quite a widespread variety of stories. So again, ultimately, enjoy what you can. Ultimately, like I said, if you want to find this book, by all means find it. I think you'll have a good time regardless. So, yeah, I think that's really all I have to say. I thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson, and I hope to see you on Thursday as we get back to doing a mini-series, because guess what? Not only did End of the Spider-Verse have an Edge of Spider-Verse lead-in, but it also had an Edge of Spider-Verse follow-up, too. So, yeah, tune in Thursday as we look at the third Edge of Spider-Verse mini-series. So, till then, I hope you have a good evening, and take care.